My family kicked me out for refusing to give my lazy brother $37,000, but when they started spreading lies about me, I blocked them all, and now I'm thriving without them. They never saw this coming. I'm 19 years old, studying business administration at university and working part-time at an electronics store, and I need to tell this story because, literally 3 weeks ago, I got kicked out of my house for refusing to give my savings to my older brother, and I still can't believe this actually happened. I guess I should start from the beginning so all of this makes sense. Because the truth is, this shit goes back years. When I was 15, just turned 15, I got my first job at a neighborhood coffee shop. It wasn't anything special, serving coffee, cleaning tables, that kind of stuff, but they paid me like $200 a week, and for me that was a ton of money. My brother Derek, who was 20 at the time, basically wasn't doing anything with his life. He had graduated high school barely. I think he had to repeat a year. And my parents were convinced he was going to find his path eventually. So in the meantime, he lived at home without paying rent, without working, just playing video, games all day and hanging out with his friends. And the worst part, what really bothered me even back then, is that my parents acted like this was completely normal and even defended him when someone asked what he was doing with his life. Since I was a kid, I always had this idea of having my own business. I didn't know exactly what kind of business, but I liked the idea of being my own boss, of building something from scratch, When I started working at the coffee shop, I decided I was going to save everything I could to eventually make that dream a reality. My parents, especially my mom, told me I was too ambitious for my age and that I should enjoy being young more. But I was focused. I opened a savings account that only I could touch. Thank God I did that. Looking back, it was the best decision I could have made. And every 2 weeks, I deposited like 80% of my paycheck. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have real expenses. I just bought the basics I needed, and that was it. Over time, I got better paying jobs. At 16, I started tutoring kids in the neighborhood in math, which gave me another $150 a week extra. At 17, I got a job at a restaurant where the tips were good. Like I could make $300 to $400 on a busy weekend. Meanwhile, Derek was still at home, now 22 years old, still without a stable job. He had tried like 3 different jobs but never lasted more than 2 months at any of them. Because he always had some excuse, that the boss was too demanding, that he didn't like the schedule, that the work was too boring. My parents kept supporting him completely. They paid for his phone, gave him money for going out, bought him clothes, everything. The thing is, I saw this, and honestly, it made me so angry. But I never said anything because I didn't want to cause problems in the family. My dad has always had kind of a strong temper, and my mom is one of those who makes you feel guilty about anything. So I learned from a young age to keep my mouth shut and do my thing. But inside I was thinking, how is it possible that I'm working since I was 15 and saving every penny while my brother does nothing, and my parents are perfectly fine with that? When I started college last year, I got a better job at an electronics store that pays pretty well, like $15 an hour, and I also kept tutoring on weekends. Between all of that, I was making close to $2,000 a month. And since I still lived at home and didn't pay rent, though believe me, I offered several times, but my dad said it wasn't necessary, I could save almost everything. By the time I turned 19, like 3 months ago, I had $37,000 in my savings account. $37,000 that I had earned with my own effort over 4 years. Working sometimes 2 or even 3 jobs at the same time while going to school. Derek by then was already 24 years old and still living at home doing practically nothing. He had had like 2 other jobs that lasted nothing, and my parents kept supporting him. The relationship between us was weird. We didn't fight or anything, but we weren't close either. He basically ignored me most of the time, and I did the same. My parents would occasionally make comments like, "You should be more like your younger brother, so hardworking and responsible." But Derek would just shrug, and that was it. About 2 months ago, Derek found an apartment he loved. It was in an expensive area of the city, like those new buildings with a gym and pool and all those things. The rent was like $1,800 a month, which is crazy considering he didn't have a job, but he was obsessed with that place. The thing is, they were asking for a deposit of 3 months' rent plus the first month, so like $7,200 to be able to move in. Derek obviously didn't have that money. He probably didn't even have $200. One night, it was a Friday. I got home from work around 9 at night, and my parents told me they needed to talk to me. I sat down in the living room, and my mom started with this super uncomfortable conversation about family and mutual support and all those things. I didn't understand where all this was going until my dad got straight to the point and said, "Your brother found an apartment, but he needs help with the deposit, and we know you've been saving money, so we want you to give him what he needs." I was like, wait, what? I asked them how much Derek needed, and my mom said about $8,000 to be safe. I laughed. I thought it was a joke, honestly. But when I saw their faces, I realized they were completely serious. I told them no. That money was for my business. That I had worked 4 years to save it. That it was my future. My dad said I was young and would have time to save again. But that Derek needed to become independent now, because he was already 24 years old, and it was time for him to have his own place. I tried to explain to them how absurd that was. I mean, why couldn't Derek get a job and save his own money? Why did I have to sacrifice 4 years of hard work for someone who hadn't even tried to make an effort? My mom started with the guilt trip, saying that family helps each other, that I was selfish, that how could I see my brother in need and not help him? I told her that Derek wasn't in need, that he wanted to live in an apartment he couldn't afford. That was very different. The conversation got more and more tense. My dad said that they had given me shelter and food for 19 years, and that the least I could do was help my brother. I reminded him that I had offered to pay rent several times and they had said no, and that besides I worked and helped around the house, it wasn't like I was a burden to them. Derek was sitting there on the couch without saying anything, just looking at me with this victim expression that made me incredibly angry. I told them I wasn't going to give Derek my money, period. My mom started crying, classic her, using tears to manipulate, and my dad's face turned red. He said that if I didn't help my brother, I should leave his house because he didn't want selfish people living with him. I thought he was exaggerating, that it would pass, so I went to my room and closed the door. During the next week, it was hell living in that house. My parents basically didn't talk to me except to make passive-aggressive comments. My mom would leave pictures of Derek from when he was a kid on the kitchen table and say things like, "I remember when you two were so close, before money became more important than family." My dad would make comments like, "It's sad when a son disappoints you so much." Derek would send me messages saying that because of me he couldn't move out and that I was a terrible brother. I tried to talk to them rationally several times. I told them I could help Derek in other ways, like help him make a resume, look for jobs for him, even lend, not give $1,000 if he really needed it for something essential. But they didn't want to hear any of that. They wanted the full $8,000. Or even better, my dad said once that Derek really needed like $15,000 to be comfortable. So, why didn't I give him that amount? Since I had $37,000 saved. Can you believe it? Somehow, in their minds, I was the bad guy for not giving away years of my work to my brother who had never made an effort for anything. And the worst part is, they genuinely believed they were right, that they were being good parents by teaching me about family and sacrifice. A week after the initial conversation, my parents gave me an ultimatum. It was Sunday morning. I was having breakfast and my dad came down and said, "You have until Friday to decide. Either you give your brother the money or you leave this house." My mom was standing behind him with her arms crossed, nodding. I told them I had already made my decision, that I wasn't going to give them my money. My dad said, "Then pack your things." I didn't think they were actually going to do it, honestly. I thought that in the end, they would realize how ridiculous all of this was, and it would pass. But Friday came, and when I got back from work at 6 in the evening, my dad was waiting for me at the door. He told me, "You have an hour to pack what you need and you're leaving." I tried to talk to him, but he just interrupted me and said, "1 hour, not a minute more." I went up to my room and, honestly, I didn't even know what to pack. I was in shock, like this is really happening. They're kicking me out of the house for not giving my money to my useless brother. I called my best friend, I'll call him Chris, though that's not his real name, and I told him what was happening. He immediately told me I could stay at his apartment as long as I needed. that he had a comfortable couch, and that it was no problem. I packed clothes, my laptop, important documents, some personal things that mattered to me. My mom came into the room at 45 minutes and just watched me pack without saying anything. But she had this martyr face, like, look, what you're making me suffer. I didn't say anything. I finished packing, grabbed my 2 suitcases and a backpack, and went downstairs. Derek was in the living room watching TV like nothing. My dad opened the door and waited for me to leave. Before leaving, I told my mom, I hope it's worth it, sacrificing one son for one who can't even support himself. She started crying again but didn't say anything. My dad just pointed at the door. I left, put my stuff in my car, a 2018 Honda Civic I had bought myself a year ago, and drove away. Driving to Chris's apartment was surreal. I couldn't process what had just happened. I kept thinking, did they really just kick me out of the house? For this? Chris greeted me with a beer and let me vent for like 3 hours. He was just as shocked as I was. He said my parents were completely crazy and that Derek was a parasite. That night, around 11, Derek sent me a message. It said something like, I hope you're happy. You ruined everything for everyone. Mom won't stop crying and Dad is furious. This is all your fault for being so selfish and greedy. I'll never forgive you for this. I responded with something brief like, get a job and pay for it yourself, and blocked him. The next few days were weird. I stayed on Chris's couch, went to university, went to work, tried to act like everything was normal, but inside I was devastated. Not so much from having left the house. Honestly, I was already planning to move out soon anyway, but from the fact that my own parents had chosen my lazy brother over me, who was the one really trying to have a future. About a week after I left, I went to see a lawyer. Sounds dramatic, I know. But my friend Chris, who studies law, told me it would be a good idea to make sure my parents couldn't touch my money somehow. The lawyer explained to me that since the account was only in my name and I was of legal age, they couldn't do anything legally. But he recommended I change banks and make sure they didn't have any of my banking information, just as a precaution. I did that immediately. I also looked for a better paying job. I found a position at a digital marketing company that paid $20 an hour with the possibility of overtime. I quit the electronics store and started there. With that money plus my tutoring, I could pay rent and keep saving a little. About a month of being on Chris's couch, who was literally the best friend in the world. During all this, he cooked for me, listened when I needed to vent, never made me feel like a burden. I found a small studio near campus. It was basic, like just one space with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it was mine and the rent was $650 a month, which I could afford without problem. I moved in there and finally started to feel some peace. During all this time, my parents didn't contact me even once. Not a message, not a call, nothing. Derek didn't either, but he was still blocked. Anyway, I didn't reach out to them either. Honestly, I was too angry and hurt. About 6 weeks after I left, my mom sent me a message. It said she missed me, that family was the most important thing, that please reconsider my decision. Note that she didn't apologize for anything, didn't acknowledge that what they did was wrong, she just wanted me to give in and give them the money. I didn't respond. My dad sent me a message a few days later. It was more direct. Your brother still needs help with the apartment. If you change your mind, let us know. I didn't respond to him either. Derek found my new number. Somehow, probably my parents gave it to him, and sent me like 5 messages in a row saying that I was the reason he couldn't move forward with his life, that it was all my fault, that I was a horrible brother. I blocked him again. About 2 weeks ago, a family friend, someone who has known my parents for years, contacted me. She told me she needed to warn me about something. Turns out, my parents are going around telling everyone that I abandoned them, that I left the house because I didn't want to follow their rules, that I'm ungrateful and turned my back on my family after everything they did for me. Obviously, they're not telling the part where they kicked me out for refusing to give Derek my money. This family friend, who I always liked, told me she knew there was more to the story and asked me what really happened. I told her everything. She was horrified, said she couldn't believe my parents had done that that Derek had always been the golden child, but that this was too much. She asked if I needed anything, and I told her no, that I was fine, but I thanked her for letting me know. After finding out my parents are spreading lies about me, I made the decision to block them completely. I blocked their numbers, blocked them on social media, basically cut off all contact. Chris asked me if I didn't regret it, and I told him no. That people who kick you out of the with house for not giving them your money don't deserve to be in your life, family or not. You know what the saddest part of all this is? That my parents probably will never understand that what they did was wrong. In their minds, they're the victims. And I'm the selfish son who chose money over family. They don't see that Derek is a 4-year-old adult who needs to learn to support himself. They don't see that they kicked out their hardworking and responsible son for refusing to be his lazy brother's bank. Now I'm 19 years old, living alone in my studio, working full-time, still going to university, and I still have my $37,000 in the bank, plus what I've continued to save. I'm working on my business plan, researching what kind of company I want to start, making connections. My life isn't perfect. There are days where I feel lonely and wonder if I did the right thing. But then I remember how they treated me, and I know I did. Last week, Chris asked me if I would ever consider reconnecting with my parents if they apologize. I told him the truth, that I don't know. An apology wouldn't change what they did, wouldn't erase the fact that they chose Derek over me, that they kicked me out of the house where I grew up for refusing to sacrifice my future for my brother's whim. Maybe, with time, I don't know. But right now, I can't even think about it without feeling angry. What I do know is that I'm better off without them. For the first time in my life, I don't have to watch them spoil Derek while ignoring all my effort. I don't have to hear passive-aggressive comments. I don't have to feel guilty for setting boundaries. I'm building my life on my own terms, with my own money that I earned with my own work, and that, at the end of the day, is worth more than a family that only wants you when it's convenient for them.